Hi guys, thanks for joining me on Making with Marilyn. On today's video, I'm going to use my Glowforge to engrave and cut a keychain out of some veg tan leather. Now after it comes out of the Glowforge, I'll add some dye to it, a protective finish, and then I'll put some hardware on it that I got from Amazon. Now I am using a lot of things today, and I think if I listed them all right now, you'd just move on to the next video. So as I'm going through the process, I will talk about each thing I'm using, and then I'll also add a list of what I used in the description below. Now let me start by showing you a couple of little things that I've been playing around with. This was just a really small piece. I didn't want to waste too much leather when I was just making a little prototype, but this is basically what we're going to come up with, but it's going to be bigger like this. Now I've already cut two little pieces of the 2 to 3 ounce veg tan leather. It's just a very thin leather. This is Herman Oak, and I got this at Springfield Leather Company. You can buy directly from them, or you can actually buy it through Amazon. Then I'm going to adhere these two pieces together so that you have two nice sides showing, one on the top, one on the bottom, and I'm going to adhere them together with this heat and bond. So here's the heat and bond. You can buy this at Walmart. You can also buy this off of Amazon. When you use heat and bond, there's two sides. There's this rough, bumpy side. It's very shiny, and that's the glue. So the first thing you do is you put your glue side down on the back of a piece of leather, and you heat this to it. And I'm going to go through this step here in just a minute. Once it's cooled back down some, you peel this paper backing off, and then you've exposed glue on this side as well. So then you put this piece back down and put it back under your iron, your easy press, or your heat press. Now I'm going to use a little Teflon sheet below it and one above it, because you can always just scrape any of the excess glue off of these Teflon sheets. And I didn't buy these Teflon sheets this small. I took an old one that had some stains and such on it, and then I cut out the good pieces and I made some tiny ones. Now I want to go ahead and finish trimming up my piece of heat and bond. It doesn't have to be perfect because, like I said, you can get this off the Teflon sheet, but there's no reason to make an extra mess when you don't have to. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on over to the heat press so we can go ahead and adhere these together. I have my heat press set to 325 degrees, so I'm just going to swing this away. I want to protect the bottom of my heat press, so I have some Kraft paper. Then I'll use one layer of my Teflon sheet. Then I want to put my leather with the back side facing up, and then again the rough side of the heat and bond down onto the leather. Then I'll go ahead and add the other Teflon sheet. And then just to protect this part of my heat press, I have a piece of butcher paper. Now I'm going to start with just 5 seconds to get that adhered. So let's check it and see if that did the trick. Okay, I can tell that it is bonded. So I'll let that cool off just for a couple minutes, then I'll peel this paper backing off. All right, let's see if that's ready to come off yet. Now for the top layer, I put the back side of the leather down on the glue. Cover it with my Teflon sheet again, and then lastly this butcher paper. Now because the heat has to get through the piece of leather, though it's relatively thin, it's going to take longer than the last pressing. So I'm going to do this for 15 seconds. Okay, so my Teflon sheet fell on the floor. This feels like it's nicely adhered. Now, what I want to do, you can see it's a little bit curved. So I'm going to put this under something heavy for just 5 or 10 minutes. I've been messing around in my craft room, so it's been about 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and check this out. Okay, that looks fine. So it's really adhered nicely. It's cooled all the way down. So before I put it in the Glowforge, I want to add some masking material. Now this is a paper-based product, and this is what is recommended to use in the Glowforge. Not all materials have to be masked. For example, if I'm going to cut something with wood that's going to be painted, then I don't mask it. Now the masking material doesn't stick to the leather super well, but it does stick to each other super well. So try to be a little more careful than I was. All right, that's ready to go in the Glowforge. So let me turn on my computer so we can enter the settings. But to know what settings to enter, I need to go ahead and use my digital calipers. Now, to turn these on, you just press this red button that says off and on. If when the jaws tightly against each other, it doesn't say 0, then you hit the yellow to 0 it out. And you can see that mine measures 0.08 inches, so we'll use that in our settings. Now this is the dashboard of the Glowforge interface. So I'm going to click on Create. I'll upload a file. And this is a file that I designed last night. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting there. These are both of my layers. Since my file was in 2 different colors, it comes in as 2 layers. And if you're going to engrave on one layer and cut on another, that's what you need to do. I think I have it placed nicely on my material. You can see Glowforge has a camera, and this is actually an image of my material sitting on the bed of my Glowforge. So I'm going to go up here to Unknown Material, and I'll click on Use Uncertified Material, and I had a thickness of 0.07. Now, I like to do my engraving first before I do the cut, because sometimes when you cut, there's so much force in there and air movement, it kind of shifts things around a little bit, or at least it tries to. So I like to do my engraving first. If your engraving comes in, let me just pull it down. If your engraving comes in on the bottom, just drag it up to the top. Now for my engrave settings, I'll click on Enter Settings. I need to tell it that I'm engraving. Then I go down here to Manual Settings. I'm going to do a speed of 600 and a power of 50. Now I want mine to be a pretty clear image. So this lines per inch, kind of like dots per inch if you're talking about resolution, I want to bump that up to 340. I have my focus height at 0.07, so I'm going to move on to the second layer. This one I want to actually cut. I'll go down here to Manual again. I'm going to do a speed of 250, full power, and then just to be safe, I'm going to go 2 passes. Then I can go right up here to print, click on that, and then Glowforge is going to figure out how long this will take. Okay, so 19 minutes 12 seconds. Let's go to the Glowforge and watch it do its thing. Okay, I know my settings are probably a little bit of an overkill for this. I need to experiment more with this thickness of leather. But I'm going to go ahead and take that out, and we'll go back upstairs and we'll add the dye to it. Now here's 3 keychains at various stages. This is actually a throwaway. For one, this is too wide. You can see it would show on the outside of my hardware. And then also I didn't have my image perfectly placed, and so it went off of the leather. So I'm just going to play with this one. Now, first thing, I'm just going to remove all this masking paper. Now, to experiment, I put some of this conditioner on this throwaway keychain to see if the dye would still take after using this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a finish coat on the little purple one, and for the purple keychain, I use this water-based dye that I got at Tandy Leather. It's deep violet. The water-based ones, you can thin them with water so that they don't come out as dark as a straight dye would. Now, I'm sure it's probably preferable to use a rag as opposed to a paper towel to put this finish coat on. Gives it just a little bit of shine, and it does give it some protection. And if I wanted more shine, I could just keep building this up with as many coats as I want to. I would let it dry in between coats. Okay, let's move on to the one that I have some conditioner on. Now for that one, I'm going to use this oxblood dye. It's going to look super, super dark, but it will dry a lot lighter than what it looks like when I put it on. As a matter of fact, let me show you a sample of that. Well, there it is right there on my fingers. Here's something I was totally just playing around with. This color is oxblood, and then this is dark brown. This is the color I'm going to use on my last keychain. I have a couple of coats of wax paper plus a paper towel under this. And when I bought this, this little dauber came in the box with it. Now my favorite method is to dip dye things. It just gives it a much more uniform finish. But with this being a throwaway, I'm not too concerned about that. You can buy thinners for these so that you could tone this down. I don't have any for the oil-based dyes. There's a product specially made for that, and then I've also heard, but I don't know this for sure, I've never used it, that you can do that with denatured alcohol. Now I'll wait for that to dry before I do the back. Now look at the huge difference in color. Look how dark this is, and then look how bright that is. When this dries, it should turn out more like this. When I first put it on this little keychain, it was super dark, and I didn't think I'd like it. And then as it dried, I really did. Now it's not real even up here, but this is going under the hardware if I were actually going to use this. Okay, so my keychain that I made today, I'm going to dye it with this dark brown leather colors dye by Phoebing's. This again is a water-based dye, so I've diluted it with just some water. Now I don't want to get any of that red dye on it, so I'm just going to go with bare hands. Okay, so in the dip dyeing, actually I put it in there and I start soaking the dye all over it. I can flip it over. The dark things you see on top, those are just bubbles. Eventually those are going to come out. Now you want to make sure that as it's drying you don't have the bubbles because it will show in the end. So I'll just let the excess dye drain back into my little container. Now these containers I got at Dollar General. They have these little plastic lids that clip down. And that way you can just leave your diluted dye in them instead of putting it back into the bottle with the full strength dye. Now I don't want to put this down on the paper towel. The paper towel would absorb the dye and then it would probably dry inconsistently. So I'm going to put it over here on the wax paper. I'm going to go ahead and let these dry for a few hours. Then I'll come back, check on them. If the front's okay, I'll go ahead and flip it over so the back can dry. Now you might notice that I have an extra keychain. What happened was, after about 4 hours, I came upstairs to check the color of all the keychains. And I really thought this was too dark. So I added just about a tablespoon of water to my brown dye. And then secondly, I only left this in there a few seconds, a lot less time than I did the darker one. So those two things made a difference. I went ahead and practiced putting the keychain hardware on, so I'll show you that step here in just a little bit. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and add a top coat to these. And even though this is a throwaway because of my mistakes, I love this color. So I'm going to put a top coat on that just to see how much or if it even changes the color. Now these are going to dry to the touch very quickly, so I'm going to give it about 10 minutes, then I'll come back and then I'll put some hardware on these two keychains. Okay, these are dry to the touch, so we're ready to move on, but I want to talk about a couple things. If you look at the backs of these two keychains, notice how there's a dark ring around the outside of this one and there's not the one on the right. Now the one on the right was done with an oil-based stain. The one on the left was done with a water-based stain. So that's one difference. The other difference is I dip dyed this one and I just rubbed this on. So this is going to take a little bit of additional experimentation to figure out exactly why that did that. Same thing on this one, but it's harder to notice because the brown is so dark. And then this one has it as well. So these three were dip dyed, these three were done in water dye, this was rubbed on, and this is an oil base. So my next Glowforge video, I'm going to make some earrings similar to this, and I'll experiment with the different methods there. The other thing, during the drying process, now I really soaked this one, I only put this in for a few seconds. And when I came upstairs today, and I actually did this at 11 o'clock last night, when I came upstairs today to check on all of this, this one was kind of humped. As it dried, it got kind of dome shaped. So what I did is I put it between two pieces of Kraft paper, and then I had butcher paper on the top and the bottom, and I actually put this in my heat press for about 15 seconds. Now I just waited till it heated up. It was about 160, 165 degrees when I did that, so it doesn't need to be extremely hot. If you don't have a heat press, you could press it under an easy press or an iron, but you do need to use pretty good pressure to get that to straighten out. As soon as I took it out from under the heat press, I put it under a flat piece of wood and I put something heavy on top and I let it sit like that for about 10 minutes until it cooled off. Okay, so we're ready to put the hardware on. And I'm going to use this hardware here. I think it says there's 40 in here. I got this off of Amazon. I'll link to that in the description. I've already added the hardware to my little purple keychain. Now, I'm going to use this set of pliers. I ordered these off of Amazon. And as soon as I used them, I realized, look at this, the jaw is curved. And I don't want that. So I reordered a straight set, and I'll get those tomorrow. So I'm not going to link to this pair, but instead I'll link to the flat jaw pair. Or I think they call it a straight jaw pair. So the first thing I want to do, look how wide that is. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze that together some so that I don't have so far to squeeze it once I get my leather inside. Now I'm going to hold my hardware straight up and down like this so that gravity can make it where this just falls in evenly. Before I do though, I want to go ahead and get a good grip on this hardware. Okay, that feels good. So make sure the teeth are on the back side of your keychain, and then just let it fall down in there flat against the bottom of the hardware. Now the next thing, I need to make sure on the sides that I'm not sticking out past one side or the other. Okay, I think I'm good. So I'm firmly pressing this against the hardware so that it stays straight, and then I'm going to squeeze down on my pliers. Now, I don't have it super tight, but I don't want to make it super straight until I have my straight jawed pliers. Otherwise, I'm going to have a little hump here, and I don't want to ruin it. So this is how it works. Again, it's not super tight. This one I went ahead and pressed all the way down, and it's probably hard to tell, but there's a little bit of an arch in my hardware because I used the wrong pliers. Now my favorite color is actually this oxblood. I just love that. So it's a shame that I ruined it, but it's a learning experience. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. Now notice that these don't extend too far down into the circle. I should have made my little tab, this part of this purple one, a little taller so that I wouldn't eat into the keychain. But again, it's a learning experience, and now I know. Hey, thanks so much for sticking it out to the end. Don't forget to hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Then click the bell and let YouTube know that you want to be notified for all videos that I upload. Also, if you're interested in a Glowforge, I do have a link below. If you use that, you can receive $250 off a Plus model or $500 off a Pro model. And then in addition, YouTube provides me a referral fee, and I appreciate that. Have a great day. Until the next video, bye-bye.